Chapter 10. Casino Royale, or as close as I'll ever come to it. Monte Carlo, Monaco. The morning flashed by like a hand-drawn animation on a deck of post-it notes. The sun rose and the people rose, and I sat outside a cozy cafe, calming my hangover and nerves with an hourly shot of espresso. And I practiced. Finally, after knocking back a final bitter brown shot of liquid energy, I read 1:50 on my watch. And it begins. Leaving the cafe with a crazy adrenaline-amped caffeine high, I felt like Goku with Ultra Instinct mastered. Trumpets ominously blared in my head as I imagined the buildings lining the streets crumbling and the frenzied public sprinting aimlessly behind me. I put on a gentle smile and strolled toward the Monte Carlo. On the hour, I passed through the glistening glass doors and torched a path straight for the tables. There stood my friend, fumbling cards and groping chips. "Back for more, eh?" he asked slyly. I smiled in kind. "Well, go ahead and take third base." "Huh?" "Over there." He pointed to the seat at his far right, rolling his eyes, but in a loving way. "Oh," I sat. I was the first to the table again, and this time I already had a drink. "Espresso today?" "Long night," I said with a British pinky sip, dignified but not practical. He laughed and gave me an understanding nod. "Well, let's get started, shall we, hotshot?" he asked. "Let's," I agreed. "What are you starting with today?" I gripped a stack of euros in my pocket. 100,000. "You sure you want to start that big?" he asked, widening his eyes. "Nobody here to impress, you know. After your killer showing yesterday, I'd suggest warming up a little bit." "Good point," I admitted. "Practice rounds. Not a bad idea." "Let's start off with 20,000 then." As he smiled, displaying that I'd made the right choice, I realized this scam had another layer to it that I hadn't considered. So, there'll be two conversations running all day, spoken one and the unspoken one. For this all to run smoothly, I'll need to comprehend both. A humble man is a wise man. He passed me 5 white chips, a red one and a green one. 20,000 euros it is. I stacked my chips and looked at Brutus expectantly. "Alrighty, let's get this show on the road," he said, splitting the main deck evenly down the middle. He began with the far half, sliding it to the center of the table. Lightning shot from his fingertips as he pulled some cards and rearranged them. Damn! I missed it. He Sith lorded the cards 5 more times until the far half was taken care of. I couldn't catch a single card. Is he serious? Moving to the near half, he slid the cards to the middle without picking his eyes up from the table. He broke off a few cards and brought down a similar thunderstorm. This time, however, there was an ephemeral deceleration just as he drew to a close. Spades? Maybe. I'm still not fast enough. He continued, shuffling another small stack. At the end, the fleeting fall-off happened again. Hearts. This time for sure. Am I getting faster? Brutus shuffled again the same way. Clubs! So, that's how it is. He's getting slower. As he continued through the rest of the cards, he slowed down at the end slightly more every time. Pretty soon, I was able to catch the number. 4 of diamonds. I wanted to punch the air in triumph, but I held myself to a grin. Didn't expect such a roller coaster before we even started. Brutus smirked. It was hard to tell whether he'd realized I figured out what he was doing, or if he just had a resting asshole face. On his final shuffle, I couldn't catch the card. He'd returned to his original speed, electricity and all. I leaned back into my chair. Without a word, Brutus had demonstrated the brilliant subtlety of the con. I'd only noticed it because I was looking for it. If you didn't look, the difference between his last 2 shuffles would be incomprehensible. It's fast enough to fool even the cameras. Brutus combined the cards. The 12 I was supposed to know were 3/4 of the way back behind a slight step like he'd described. "Cut the deck, would ya?" I obliged, slicing the cutting block into the deck at the step. After rearranging the cards, he dropped them into the shoe, and I giggled. So that's the shoe. "Now," he said, rolling his eyes, "let's play." For the first bunch of games, my luck was on par with the day before. Win 1 or 2 games, lose 10. Since I started with a couple reds and a green, my supply of chips actually grew at first. Once my deck was whitewashed, though, my losses started to show, and I held a stoic grimace as I bled out. Before Brutus shuffled again, 2 familiar faces joined us at the table. The geezer, strapped with an old-fashioned in one hand and a wad of cash in the other, and the hag waddling behind him. After the man sat, his wife thumped him on the head and stole half of his euros. Adorable. How nice! Looks like we've got ourselves a little reunion, the hag cackled. I rolled my eyes, glancing at Brutus for backup, but he joined in the woman's laugh, almost like he was following orders. I let out a tsk and cracked all my fingers, just because I knew the boomers had too much arthritis to do the same. What, you ain't happy to see us again? The geezer roared before chugging his drink. No, I'm thrilled. And the second shuffling began, with Brutus grabbing some cards from the far half and dazzling the boomers with his lightning tempo. Here it comes. As he finished the display, he performed an infinitesimal retardando, and I caught the card. 9. He continued, and I retained the stern, frustrated expression I'd cultivated after losing for the past 40 minutes. When it came to disguises, I was a master. After all, I was the best thief east of the Pyrenees. You've got no strategy, kid. You're going to lose all your money again, the geezer exclaimed. Yeah, sir? And you're a real Napoleon yourself, huh? The table laughed, even the hag, but then she backed up her absolute Einstein of a husband. Oh, but he has a point, sweetie. You'll go bankrupt if you keep it up like this. I grumbled as if she had a point. I should have gone into the film industry. As we spoke, I picked up the number and order of the first 12 cards. All right, Brutus said. Third base gets to cut the deck, house rules. I nodded and carved at the step. Ah, so that's why you put me here. As he loaded the cards into the shoe, I ran a simulation of the game in my head. It'll be a flawless win. Place your bets. I glared at the boomers, working my face into an earnest scowl. Let's have him think I'm going big to prove myself. I'll bet 250,000 euros. The table was floored. Even Brutus appeared shocked, and maybe he was. I mean, he never told me how much to wager, and just like that, I'd put it all on the line. Since I'd already pissed away nearly 20,000 euros, I'd be in the red if I lost. After the others placed their bets, both modest in the face of mine, Brutus issued the 3 of us our hands. 6 and 7. Just like I thought. I need the 8. Brutus stared at the geezer, indicating that it was his turn. He's got a total of 14, so we'll take another card. Too bad the next one's a 9. Damn it! The man screamed, losing a black chip with his bet. Next is the 8. Brutus turned to the hag. She's got 2 9s, making 18. She'll definitely stand. She waved her hand horizontally, confirming my suspicion. Brutus then turned to me. Perfect. Hit me! I drummed my pointer finger on the table. Brutus obliged and slapped the 8 onto my deck. Well, would you look at that? He feigned surprise. The geezer choked on his old-fashioned, and the hag crossed her arms. I peered at them side-eyed. Well, what you got? I asked Brutus with a smirk. He pulled 4 cards, bringing his hand to a 25. He slid 5 fresh purple chips to my pile. You win. All right. So, what were you saying about going bankrupt, ma'am? I directed at the hag. Knowing the odds all too well, my upset was all the more upsetting. Ha! She puffed, turning her chin. The geezer slammed his fist on the table. Well, let's just see if you can keep it up, huh? With my hardy armor of 500,000 euros, they existed to me only as observers. They were no longer fellow players. In fact, the game itself had transformed entirely. It had become a play, and the boomers were the audience. For my performance, I'd be paid my freedom in the form of 1 million euros, split down the middle with my co-star Brutus. All that mattered was the believability of the show. In the second game, the 12 cards ran out right before my hand was dealt. Without knowing all the details, wild bets were no longer an option. Now we wait. I used a couple red, but mostly white chips for the time being, which pissed off the boomers even more than my initial victory. The geezer, emboldened by my illustrious win, had put up a strong bet of 2 purple chips in the following game. Luck, to his great dismay, failed to ensure his success. You can't trust Lady Luck with your money, and you especially can't trust her when you've placed a seasoned stockbroker's yearly income on the line. Not so bold anymore, are you, kid? Asked the geezer with fumes. Just don't want to push my luck, you know, I replied. Lightning doesn't strike twice, sweetie, the hag spat. At least you get that. Exactly. I flashed her an innocent, albeit distinctly smug, smile, which she forced herself to reciprocate. The geezer fiercely rocked his head side to side, protesting fate. Lady Luck was unkind, as usual. My pile followed its familiar trend, growing until I'd bleached all my red chips, then gradually shrinking. I'd estimate I saw the same 2 to 10 ratio of wins to losses. As the games passed, the boomers' condescending attitude steadily returned, and they sang songs of snobbery. "You ought to thank God for that first game, kiddo," the boomer yelled after a particularly lucrative game for him. "Yeah, I guess it's true what they say about beginner's luck, huh?" I said, rubbing my neck with a slight laugh. I went bust again as the deck ran out and checked my watch. 3:25. Great timing. I lost exactly 17,000 euros. It was a truly laughable display. Still, my total sat at 233,000 euros, and my big win was becoming a distant memory to the boomers. I'm in a good spot. Now I just have to finish it off this next turn. "At least you've got money to waste now, sweetie," the hag said, playing around with a modest red chip she'd won in the last game. The geezer thundered in assent and took a hearty swig of his 5th old-fashioned of the afternoon. After his especially grueling defeats, he'd finish off whatever was left in his glass and escape to the bar to replenish his backbone with liquor. He was a pickup truck, guzzling through tanks of whiskey on the Highway 21. "Fair enough," I agreed as Brutus got ready for his 3rd shuffle of the day. The hag scoffed, and the drunken geezer wiped some leftover bourbon from his double chin, which was becoming more pronounced with every trip to the bar. Brutus split the pile and got to work, which I easily detected in my periphery. "Got any more big moves, champ?" the geezer probed, awkwardly stretching his gangly arms. I chuckled as he stared at me through plastered eyes. Unsure of who to loathe more, the hag darted her eyes back and forth between the two of us. All the while, Brutus delivered me a roster of 12 cards. "They're making this too easy." With a diligent nod, I replied, "You know what, old man? I think I'm going to hope for another stroke of fortune." "Hate to interrupt the bonding, you two," Brutus said, lifting a hand toward me, "but I need you to cut the deck." "Right," I replied, circling back to face him. The deck was different this time around. "What? Why are there 2 steps instead of 1? I momentarily analyzed the pile and decided the bigger step might be a decoy to ward off the cameras. "No time. Damn it!" I shoved the cutting block before the lighter step. "There you go." Brutus nodded and fixed the deck, betraying nothing. We placed our bets. I don't have time for this, and he knows that. The boomers went first this time, starting with modest bets like they had before. "There's no chance I get another game after this." Brutus looked at me expectantly and cleared his throat. "Sir, your bet?" With eager looks from the boomers and an impatient stare from Brutus, I prepared to throw my life on the line once more. Sweat pooled in my armpits and dripped down the sides of my torso. I straightened my back and clenched my jaw. There's no way for me to know if it's the right choice, but 550,000 euros. "You're insane!" the geezer yelled. The hag's eyebrows shot up and her forehead surrendered into 1,000 wrinkles. "Sweetie," she started. "I'm dead serious," I asserted, betting again with chips I didn't even have. 550,000. She shook her head, undoubtedly knowing my odds of success. Her eyes spoke clearly. I was fucked. The cards branded into my mind, I sat silently waiting for Brutus to deal. I'll know by my hand, I guess. Should be 2 sevens. The geezer got his cards, issued a guffaw, and sipped his drink. The hag got hers, and studied expressionlessly, running thousands of scenarios through her calculator brain. Shit! Even if I'm right, will I win with this set of cards? The geezer, drunk and invigorated, would be sure to draw cards until he went bust. He'll take exactly 2 more cards. The hag, who would have 12, would also probably take a card. She'd get a 7, bringing her to a formidable 19. She'll take 1 card and stand. My hand would be 2 sevens. Taking the next card, a 6, would leave me at a scarcely superior 20. The remaining 3 cards, 5, 8, and 9, would bring Brutus to a 22. As long as I cut it correctly, I'll win. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes. The sound of Brutus slapping my 2 cards down rang in my ears, but I was too nervous to look. What's wrong, kid? The geezer grilled. Don't have the balls to back up your bet, huh? I swallowed. My mind raced through all kinds of vivid scenes. Mary Beth, standing in our kitchen, clutching the Springfield with those yellow gloves. Kenny, in the high chair dripping with applesauce and blood. Simon with a hand on my shoulder, handing me the passport with Monaco on his lips. Selene standing alone on the dock in Marseille, with her blonde hair whipping in the wind. Is this what they talk about? Your life flashing before your eyes when you die? It's a good hand, sweetie, the hag said. 2 sevens is good luck. I gasped for air and opened my eyes. There they were, 7 of diamonds and 7 of hearts. I let out a giant sigh of relief. You're a dramatic one, ain't ya? The geezer said with a sardonic laugh. The game unfolded exactly as I envisioned. The geezer went bust, downing his old-fashioned and muttering something about stupid damn kids as he stumbled to fill up at the bar. The hag stood with her 19 and hurled an acidic glance in my direction. Brutus handed me a 6, and I waved my hand horizontally. The hag scowled, seeming to suspect that there might be more than luck on my side. If anyone's going to catch on, it'll be her. Brutus showed me his 3 cards, culminating in a hand of 22. In an instant, my pockets had become insanely dense. Well, sir, Brutus said smoothly, you just picked up over $500,000. Gotta say, that's some real luck. I laughed as he delivered 11 purple chips to my swelling pile. Luck? Yeah, some luck. What's the deal, huh? The hag wheezed in frustration. What? Are you serious, you little shit? Do you think I'm stupid? She yelled, crossing her arms. Are you saying I'm running some kind of scam here? I asked, launching a finger at her. Scam? No. If you were smart enough to really scam, you wouldn't be so obvious. And it's obvious that you aren't too smart. I mean, 550,000 euros? Please! Hell would freeze over before that could happen. Ma'am, you aren't suggesting that my table isn't clean, are you? Brutus calmly intervened. The hag spun at him deliriously. The statistics governing her mind overwhelmingly condemned the situation. However, she had no concrete evidence. Ha! You've got nothing, Betty White. No, it's just... Well, he... The hag sputtered. Look, if there'd been foul play, I'd have caught it. It's my job. But the odds are... The odds, I chimed. That's all you think about. This is a game of luck, Grandma, not odds. I took a risk, and I got lucky. It doesn't matter what I bet. I'd have won with 550, the same I did with 550,000. The hag stood, trembling in fury. Justifiably so, too. Her worldview had never been so threatened with such an obvious impossibility. She was right, though she couldn't prove it. Only Brutus could. And he's on my side. Let's continue. No? Brutus asked curtly. I nodded, showcasing a lingering irritation at being wrongfully accused. Fine, the hag mumbled, helplessly sitting back in her chair. She fully short-circuited, her eyes glazing forward with nothing left to give but a blank stare. I imagined that her thoughts were fully occupied with images of pigs sprouting wings and frolicking in the sky with the ravens and hawks. Probably she ran a computation about the pigs, too. The geezer then tottered back from the bar, drink in hand. What did I miss? For the rest of the afternoon, the games went the same way as usual. Poorly. I lost and I lost, throwing away another 20,000 euros, which left me with 12,000 more than the million I intended to split with Brutus. The geezer was piss drunk. I'm pretty sure he actually pissed his pants a few times after big losses. The hag, for her part, seemed uneasy for the rest of the afternoon. She never accepted that I'd come into my fortune honestly. Still, her meticulous gameplay continued game after game. The only notable change was in Brutus. He twitched a couple times when he handed out cards. He began to check his watch, which he had only done in between shuffles before. He developed tiny beads of sweat, first on his temples and then on his hands. The boomers seemed not to notice or not to care. The shift in Brutus's demeanor wasn't lost on me, however. I don't blame him. I'd be rattled after that outburst, too. As the deck began to run low, the geezer suffered another unnerving loss. Looks like it's back to the bar, he announced to the table. He stood with a thundering burp, ejecting a liquor-stained mist across the table. Oh, go eat shit, the hag condescended. The geezer chortled, hiccuping during the laugh. He grinned and began to sway with pomp and circumstance toward the bar. "Should we wait for him?" Brutus asked. I checked my watch. 4:03. The geezer's absences, which were at first very swift, had become quite lengthy after about his 8th or ninth trip. "No," the hag replied and shook her head. "That fart's going to be gone for at least 20 minutes. We'll wrap up before he gets back." "All right," Brutus said with a jumpy glance at his own watch. I started to mull over the rest of my afternoon. Finish up here, split the money with Brutus, and get to the embassy. I think this will actually work. I rubbed my temples and stared at my empty cup of espresso. I smiled at the brown stains at the bottom. The little things start to be more enjoyable when the looming threat of death starts to fade away. Just about an hour left now. "Hey!" I heard from over my shoulder. "Hey," Brutus returned. "What do you need?" My stomach flipped. "Is there room for one more?" the voice asked. I wheeled around. It was an elegant woman in a bold royal blue dress. She didn't look at me. Brutus glanced at the hag, who shrugged. "Sure," he said. "Buying is 10,000. "Great," she said, taking the geezer's vacant seat. She reached into her patterned bag and dropped a stack of euros on the table. Among the bills fell a small red leather book that read, Union Europea España Pasaporte. "Oops," the woman said, picking out the passport. I gaped at her, terror rising rapidly from my feet to my forehead. She finally glanced my way with an innocent smile. "Oh, and I'm Selene, by the way. Nice to meet ya." The last couple of games followed a slightly changed pattern. I kept losing white chips, and the hag still sat silently, and Brutus continued to leak subtle signs of distress. For the roughly 10 minutes we played, I stared at Selene and struggled to keep my jaw sealed. Unlike Brutus, my distress was concealed very poorly. Selene occasionally met my gaze with a soft smile, her dimples and cheery blue eyes almost completely masking her contempt. Almost completely. Her luck in the games was astonishing. Selene won more than she lost, 4 of the remaining 7 games. When she'd win, the fantasy of us sailing through the Mediterranean together popped into my head, getting more perverse with each time. By the end, it was a scene straight out of the Odyssey. I was Odysseus, strapped to the mast of his ship without earplugs, and Selene was a siren tormenting me. Thrashing around in anguish, I welded my eyes together, but her call still found me. Eventually, she tossed me overboard, cackling as I sunk to the bottom of the sea. "Sorry, everyone, looks like it's my lucky day," Selene exclaimed, staring at her pile of chips after winning the final game. Brutus dispassionately chuckled and quickly said, "All right, well, that's it for the table." I nodded in assent, and the hag grumbled. "Guess I'll go find that bumbling idiot," she said, shooting me a skeptical parting glance. Brutus eyed me nervously. "Right, well, I guess I'll get out of here too," he said, and promptly dashed off. I didn't watch where he ran off to. I couldn't watch him even if I wanted to. Peering at Selene across the table, she seemed to be lost in her chips. I attempted an escape, quietly sliding out of my chair and circling around. "And where do you think you're going, Patrick?" she asked, without lifting her eyes. I froze. Freedom lay outside in the courtyard. A brief exchange with Brutus. A 2-kilometer walk to the Italian embassy, a shaking of hands, and the passing of 500,000 euros. Escape was an ice cube in my hands, melting and slipping away. "I think we need to talk," she said. The words nobody ever wants to hear strung together in a sentence.